Today's climb down by the government on sentencing will have a huge impact on Britain's prisons. It's a problem that's already caused a crisis in California, where overcrowding is so bad that the US Supreme Court has actually ruled conditions violate America's Constitution. But the state of California is broke. Taxpayers aren't prepared to pay to improve conditions. Our Washington correspondent reports now from Los Angeles.
The ripe smell of too many men, all packed into the same tight space, is the first thing that hits you inside the LA County State Prison. It looks like a human warehouse, as inmates are forced to live, triple stacked in bunk beds, in the prison gym. Even prison inspectors call it inhumane, when 54 inmates have to share just one toilet.
This is a gym. You should be exercising in here, not living in here. You know, having everybody jammed in here like sardines. And then when I sleep, my feet come through here, and they stick up over here. Because I can't stretch out all the way, I hit my head, so I have to put them underneath. There's another guy here, and there's another guy sleeping right there. So it's crammed. It's like being on a submarine or something.
California's prisons have always been notoriously tough, and deliberately so. But when the US Supreme Court was shown these pictures, they decided the overcrowding is cruel and unusual punishment and violates the American Constitution. They said these conditions are causing needless suffering. One inmate a week is dying because they don't have access to a doctor, while mentally ill patients are kept in these cages like animals, often soaked in pools of their own urine. And the suicide rate has soared. So the Supreme Court has ruled California must reduce its prison population by 33,000 inmates. That's about half the total number of prisoners in England and Wales. But outside the prison walls, no one can agree on how they are supposed to do that. California pioneered a lot of the really tough sentencing policies, like 3 strikes and you're out, that are now contributing to the state's overcrowding problem. And they did it because being tough on crime was always an easy way to be popular with voters. But now this Supreme Court ruling has left Californians with a difficult choice. Do they spend millions of dollars building new prisons at a time when the state is flat broke, or do they start letting inmates out of jail? An idea so unpopular, the governor has already had to promise voters that not one single prisoner will be released early. Not even 71-year-old Arthur Anderson, who's been inside for 48 years for a murder he committed in the early 60s.
We're overcrowded, living in like a cesspool.
Anderson insists he and many other elderly inmates could be safely released to reduce the prison numbers. But if any prisoners were to be set free, there would be a furious public outcry.
I'm a grandfather now. I'm not a teenager anymore, so I would never live the lifestyle that I lived when I came in. I'm not a danger to nobody.
My sister Katina was murdered.
Strident law and order campaigners are making it impossible for the governor to solve the overcrowding crisis by reducing the number of people in jail.
Shot to death by an ex-boyfriend. No mercy, no remorse. He watched football on TV after killing her.
Your parole policies are dangerous, Governor.
You promised to stand with victims, Governor. You let us down.
But the governor doesn't have any money to build new prisons or adequately staff the ones he has, which makes life dangerous for both inmates and the guards. In these cramped conditions, violence flares quickly and easily, and it's met with brutal force.
You'll have something that starts out a 2-person fight over the television channel, all of a sudden becomes a 30 or 40 or 50-man fight. And the staff generally come in and use pepper spray and batons. My search and escort officers are all equipped with pepper spray grenades. And my supervisors and some of the staff have, it looks like a small fire extinguisher with pepper spray. And all you do is hose them down and then sort them out once you get them contained.
That sounds like a pretty inhumane way of sorting out a fight.
Well, but how do 3 or 4 people control a 40 or 50-man fight?
Susan Burton knows what it's like to live in these conditions. A lot of the women's jails are worse than the men's, full of people like her, convicted of minor offences like drug possession. What does it do to people who are kept in these kind of incredibly overcrowded conditions? What happens to people when they're made to live like that?
It's one of the most degrading experiences, dehumanizing experiences that can be encountered by a person. And Laura?
Hi there. Burton introduced me to some of the women living in the halfway house she runs, where she tries to prevent these ex-cons from being sent straight back to the overcrowded prisons they've just been released from. But she doesn't get any help from the state. They don't give her a cent to help her to try and keep these women out of jail.
We can spend so much incarcerating and punishing, but we can't spend on the other end of rehabilitation and just meeting basic human needs. It just behooves me when it's so much more much cost effective, so much more humane, and so much more productive to work on the other end of bringing a person through a hardship.
Once every 3 days, the prisoners get outside for some exercise. This is about the only kind of self-improvement available. In California, as in much of America, the emphasis in prison is on punishment and retribution, not rehabilitation. The state spends over $10 billion a year on keeping prisoners in jail, very little on helping them stay out once they're released. So as they keep being sent back here, the overcrowding just gets worse and worse. While voters who demand harsh sentences for these offenders won't agree to the tax increases required to house them humanely. Sarah Smith, Channel 4 News, Los Angeles, California.